All right, let's see if is that working? I think we got it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you and welcome to this webinar. We're trying to get some technical difficulties worked out, but I think we've got them now. All right, I'm going to start. We're just going to do some basic retouching today. My mainline business is to do actor headshots, so a lot of my clients are going to be actors. And with actor headshots, one of the things you do is actually a fairly minimal retouching. The only thing you retouch in an actor headshot are things that can be covered by makeup or things that are temporary. You leave scars, you leave wrinkles for the most part. You can soften some of those things. You can soften bags under the eyes, but in general, you're not going to be doing a whole lot of detailed retouching. So one of the ones I want to start here was with Nick, and we're going to use several different tools while we do our retouching today. As you can see here, he has a few flyaway hairs. We're going to start with the flyaway hairs. And what I'll use for this is the scratch remover brush. It's over here on the clone brush menu. And if you look, it has this long, narrow, you click and drag, and it has a long, narrow influence area. The area that's in between is what it's going to try and scratch out, take out based on what's in the outside edges of the tool. So let's see so we can get a good example of how that works. We'll take this hair right here. If I just take this right here, it'll take out that one blank and try and patch in the rest of it. It does a really good job with it. It's a very efficient clone tool method, or more efficient than the clone tool method to do this. And it was originally developed to do scratch removing for when you do restorations on photos, to take scratches off of photos, but it works really well for flyaway hairs. And that's what I'll use here for this. And it'll take out fairly large chunks. You can adjust the size of the influence area on this menu, on this width up here. I usually keep it right around there. Let's go back and undo that last one I just did because that didn't look right. And just liberally applying to the areas. I should have gone through and made the before and after on this one. We'll do it in a minute. But we'll go through here. We're going to retouch some of the extra hairs on this side. And it's just click and drag and keeping the area that we want to clean up inside that center part of the bubble. And then we'll do some of this right here as well. I'm going to make this a little wider to get rid of that extra shadowing that's happening. All right, I'd have to clean that up just a little bit more. I'll do that in a few minutes. I'll show another method of cleaning that up in a moment. All right, that looks pretty good for using that brush. Now, second, as you can tell, he has a little bit of an acne breakout going on. Again, that's something I can remove in an actor headshot. And what I'll use for that is the Makeover tool, and then it's the blemish fixer. That's right here. And what you'll get is this little circle with an extra circle in the middle of it. And again, just like the scratch remover tool we just used, what it does is try to replace what's in that center circle influenced by what's going to be in the outer circle. So for instance, if I put this blemish right here in the middle of that circle, click once, that blemish disappears based on the stuff that was in the outside circle. Click there, do it again. If I just hit part of it, sorry, I didn't undo right there. If I just hit part of it, you'll see it can take off partial blemish. You can do it a little bit at a time, or I could have, let's go back and bring that whole thing back again on undo. I could make my size larger and do it that way. Now you have to be careful with this one. If you make your size too large and just try to do that, you'll see, I'll zoom in a little bit more so you can see it. You'll see there's a weird lines that are created because I made that tool too big. It didn't do a very good job of cloning the extra space in because the tool was too large. If I make that tool smaller again, it does a much better job for the final product. So while it's a great tool, you don't want to try to do too much at one time. You have to do a lot of little steps instead of one big one. You can't do it all at once. You have to do them a little at a time, otherwise it doesn't really understand what it is you're trying to do. And it does its best, it just doesn't understand what you're trying to do. I'll take out some more of these blemishes here. I'm just clicking through while I continue to talk about it. Click out here. Smooth out right there. Now this area up here where I was saying needed to fix up earlier from, no, the blemish remover is not going to do what I want it to do up there. Sometimes the blemish remover, I can also get rid of some of that nonsense that I created accidentally. As you can see, it's also cleaning up some of these extra stray hairs that were missed when I did the other tool a minute ago. For the most part, nobody's looking at a photo this close anyway, so it's just for your own sanity, trying to get this close and retouching these fine details out. I'm still using that blemish remover. I'm still going to catch in these last couple here. Now here's where blemish removers, it's not going to do a real good job right here at the size I'm at, I don't think. Nope, it did do it. It did do it pretty well. If I came in too much larger, because there's so many different contrast colors here, if I tried to do it like here, got that weird patch again, like I said a minute ago. So the idea is to get it in as small as I can to just cover up the blemish itself and not too much extra space. Otherwise it's going to, see right here, if I try to do it with too large, it's going to take out some of that natural wrinkle to his face. We don't want that. We just want the blemish to go away. So we make it just small enough to cover the blemish. Just a couple more and we'll go on to the next piece. It's also good for the occasional flyaway hair. Oh, I missed one right there. All right. Looks pretty good. We cleaned up a lot of the blemishes on his face. Next, I'm going to take, hopefully you understand a little bit about layers. Well, think of layers as having multiple copies or multiple pieces of tissue paper over the top of it. It's the paper doll method, where you have your base image and then you have a layer over the top of that that has a few things that adds to it and so on. What I'm going to do right here is actually duplicate this current layer, which is I've got my menu set up so that I have these buttons up here available to me. This is a duplicate layer. So what it's done is create a copy of my background exactly as it was. So there's no changes from there to there right now. It's just a complete duplicate. I'm going to take this brush right here called the push brush. Now the push brush is an interesting brush inside PaintShop Pro. It takes everything you see in the middle of the brush and it pushes it around. Wherever it was you clicked down, and then it resamples as you move across and it pushes it around. Now that looks really terrible, of course, because I was just messing with it. But to give you an idea of what it does. But it's very powerful for this kind of a retouching because, and I've got a specific brush called Fuzz Soft, which I think is included in PaintShop Pro. At least it was at one time in the past. It may still be, but any of the brushes will do. I've got it set for a full density, and then I've got it set for about 2/3 of opacity. And what I'm going to do is take a size of brush about that big, and I'm just going to gently click and drag and fix up the coloring that I messed up here earlier when I was using the scratch remover brush. And I'm also going to use this same brush for fixing up this area here where there's just a little bit of a hot spot on his forehead from the flash. Just paint in. All I'm doing is clicking and dragging, just a little bit of click and drag. Here, it softens up the edges of that. Now, that by itself doesn't look good because what we've done is take out, oops, I zoomed in way too tight. What I've done is take out texture as well by doing that. But this is why I duplicated it. So what I can do now is change the opacity so only partially shows through. It lets some of that texture below come through still after all. Now this still needs a little bit of work right up here. Just gonna clean that up. By changing the opacity down to about, looks like 67, I've managed to bring back some of the texture underneath without bringing in that ugly hot spot that was there before. There's with the ugly hot spot, and there's with that padded layer on, or that smoothed out layer, the pushed layer around underneath it. Now I'm going to use that same tool here for the bags under the eyes. I'm just going to gently move color around and paint in some additional color to just soften the bags under his eyes. And a little bit of the hot spot on his nose. I'll zoom out to a regular size, and you can see the difference as I turn off and back on that layer. That's with it on. That's with all the changes we just made with push brush, and that's with it off again. So we're going to leave that on. Now I'm going to flatten this image again, because one of the other things I do with my actor headshots is I'll enhance the eyes. Now there's a fun way to enhance the eyes that I discovered several years ago, and I'll share it with you here. As again, we're going to use the layers, but this time we're going to duplicate the layers twice. That's the first time. Duplicate it again. We're going to select the middle layer. So the changes I'm going to make next are only going to be happening on this middle layer. The background's here, the middle layer's here. And all I'm going to do on this layer is go into adjust, sharpness, high pass sharpen. It's got to do its proofing. A radius of 7, strength of 100, blend mode is soft light. And I'm just going to use that setting. That's my default setting for this change. Now, right now, it doesn't look like it did anything because this top layer is still a duplicate of the bottom layer. If I turn that off, you'll see what it did a little bit. See, it's just a slightly sharper image. I'm going to take the eraser brush and go in and erase just around where the color and the iris of the eye are. The color of the eye and the pupil of the eye, sorry, are. I'm erasing that off the top layer. So now only the changes I made on that middle layer are only coming through where the eyes are, where I just erased. If I turn off both these bottom layers, you'll see he has big holes where his eyes are. That's turning on the middle layer again. And now we'll turn off the middle layer back on and off so you can see just the difference in the eyes. It's just a very, very subtle difference, which we're going to enhance again by taking a white paintbrush in soft light blend mode and an opacity on that paintbrush of about 20. I size it so it's just about the same width as the color between the color of the eye and the pupil. And opposite of where my catch light is, this is my catch light here. Opposite of where my catch light is, I'll just draw in a little white arc right there at the bottom. Now I'll turn that layer on and off again. Oh, wait, I'm on the wrong layer. No wonder this didn't look right. Go back. I have to do that soft light change that I made. I undid it off that top layer. I have to do that soft light change here on the middle layer to make this look right. Yeah, that looks better. And just a little change. I'm just going to draw in little tiny arcs right there. Now I'll turn that layer on and off so you can see the difference. That's from his eyes there to his eyes there. We'll zoom out so you can see the difference on the zoomed out image. That's from there to there. Now, if at any point you decide you overdid it just a little bit, because this background layer is still a copy of your original, you can change the opacity of this layer and just take that effect down just a little bit if it's more than what you intended. Because sometimes somebody will come up and they'll tell you the eyes look overworked. And in this case, I think they were. So I'm taking that opacity down to about 69%, it looks like. Yeah, that looks pretty good. All right. So that gives us a pretty good feel for how I would retouch an actor headshot. I would call this one done at this point. I have scripts that I've created that will then imprint his name on it, just like you see on any actor headshot. So we're just going to save him off. And we'll go on to our next image that we have here. Got to finish all the saving first. Now there's not a whole lot to do more on this particular actor. She has fairly perfect skin, but when you zoom in, you'll see a little bit of her of some blemishes that we can remove and fix up. I brought in this background because I'm also going to talk about changing out the background a little bit, because this was shot just on a plain blue in a blue studio or a blue screen studio, and that for an actor headshot is fairly boring. So again, we're going to take the blemish remover. We're going to take out just a couple of these little blemishes, keeping it fairly similar in size to the blemishes themselves. Just a hint of some red spots that we're going to take out. I'm going to use the scratch remover to take out these very fine lines on her neck. And a couple of these flyaway hairs on her neck. And there was a crazy wild hair right here and right here that I'm also using the scratch remover to take out. The scratch remover is not as important to be small in this particular case because that blue background is so solid. We don't have to worry about it pulling in extraneous details. Now you have to be careful when you're pulling off flyaway hairs on a headshot, because otherwise, if you do it too wrong, if you do it too correctly, if you do too much, or you use the clone brush, say right here, I could take a clone brush. Now, clone brush will, you right click first to do your source area. That's what that circle with the X is, and then you left click to paint in whatever's in the source area into the secondary circle that you have here. And what I'm going to do is make this a little smaller, and I'll show you one of the things you can really overdo with a clone brush. And we can paint out this extra hair that's right here with the blue background. So, but if I do it too tight, she gets what I call helmet hair, and it doesn't really look right. So we want to take that back out again. We don't want to have quite that much cloning. We're going to clone out just a little bit of the edge here. We're going to leave some of these flyaway hairs because the flyaway hairs help make it look more natural. All right. Let's do the eye enhancement again on her, shall we? Let's go here. We're going to duplicate the layer, duplicate it again, select my middle layer. We're going to adjust sharpness, high pass sharpen, radius of 7, strength 100, blend mode is soft light. Take my eraser brush back to that top layer. Erase just the color of the eye. And then select that middle layer and get my paintbrush that's still here in a soft light blend mode, 20 opacity. And opposite of my catch light, I'm just going to draw in a couple arc a little bit so we can get just a little bit of an enhancement on the eyes. All right, I'm going to flatten all that. Now, those that were watching closely probably saw me bring in an extra image on this one. I brought in this background, this office background, because we want to add in a little bit of a little bit more interest to the background here for this image. Again, I've flattened it all down, so we just have our background layer. I'm going to duplicate that layer. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Then I'm going to go in and use the object extractor that is on the image menu, object extractor. And what this will do is allow me to paint in where my edges are of what I want to keep. And because of the way I'm going to do this background replacement, this doesn't have to be a perfect extraction. It just has to be a reasonably close. I don't care about the flyaway hairs particularly for this part because of the way that this blending happens, or the next step happens. I'll explain that when we get to it in just a moment. But right now I'm just taking this green brush and highlighting around where my edges are. And right here too, where the background is peeking through her hair. And then we take the fill brush and fill in what we're keeping. Click process, let it do its thing. I'm going to set the accuracy mode up to this 3/4 level. Let it do its little update again. And I'm going to click OK. Now it doesn't look like it changed anything over here, but if you look over in my layers, you'll see that the top layer actually has a transparent background now. The bottom layer is still the way it was. I just turned it off for a moment, but it still has a transparent background. Now what I'm going to do is come over here to this background layer that I collected a minute ago. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. Excuse me. Copy it to the clipboard. I'm going to paste that image that I just copied as a new layer in between those two layers. I'm going to take the pick tool and place it and resize it so that it fills the background behind her. I could use a low resolution photo. As a matter of fact, I have used a fairly low resolution photo for this particular task because I'm also going to blur this background in a moment. So a low resolution photo won't matter as much. Now we're going to blur it, and I'm going to blur it at its maximum radius of 100. Just like that. And now for the blend mode for this, because right now this looks pretty good, but the extraction wasn't perfect. You can still see where I have some little bit of blue peeking through from the previous one because I just did a quick sloppy extraction. If I change the blend mode on this middle layer down to overlay, you see how her hair from the bottom layer started coming back through again? I'll turn it back to normal for a second. That's with the background on normal. The background I added on normal, and this is background on overlay mode. Now what this has done is it's doing overlay mode blending with the background layer, not my top layer. My top layer is still in normal mode. My background layer is overlaid over the bottom layer. So you can see here where the hair now is showing through the background. It gives it a more natural look. Now it does change the color of the background to similar color what she had behind her, that blue background. Let me turn off the top layer too so you can see what that looks like. See, if I didn't have the top layer in normal mode, that overlay would change the color of her because of the color of this background on this layer, the office background on that layer. So I'll turn that layer back on. Now, you don't have to use overlay. You can use other modes. Multiply will make it much darker, but it still adds some interest to it. I don't think multiply works real well for this particular image. Overlay looks pretty good. Let's see, hard light oftentimes will look good. I think hard light adds the wrong colors to it. Soft light soft light actually looks pretty good too. It gives a nice neutral background colors. We wanted a background that's for it to be interesting, but not necessarily distracting. And I would call that image good there. So we're just going to save it off and move on to our next one as well. Close that down, close that down, and we'll go back to our manage screen. Let's actually move on to this one for a moment. This is one of my model clients that comes in for modeling portfolio images occasionally, and this is one of those examples of someone who when you at first glance has a fairly good body. She doesn't have any extra folds, she doesn't have any extra wrinkles into that, but there is still things you can change, and this is where I'll talk about a little bit goes a long way for what you can use with the warp brush. Now the warp brush, people overuse it. Let's make a big one here. They'll take this and they'll bring her in really skinny, and it ends up looking really false. But everybody, no matter how good they look, when they have on a tight strap or tight clothing, they get these kinds of, right here, these kinds of indentations in their skin, and they don't like that. So what you do is you take a warp brush, a very small version of a warp brush, and just gently push in to make it look just without quite the indentations, but still looks normal. Now that's what it looked like before, and that's what it looks like after. See, I didn't change her body shape a whole lot, so it doesn't look unnatural, but it does fix up that little bit that I know she would complain about. We use warp to correct the pose, not the body. All right, that's a quick test on warp. We'll come back to this image again in a moment if we want. I did not save that when we just did. I remembered why I brought this image in. And then one of the last methods we'll talk about here for today is a way to do dodging and burning to add depth to an image and or to enhance makeup. Now, again, this girl, she has pretty perfect skin, good high school senior. They always seem to crazily have good skin. We're going to use a scratch remover. We'll take out this extra hair. I did that too wide. That's a really good example of why you won't want to do this too wide. When I did that too wide, it created this weird ridge right here. So let's go back, undo that. We'll make our width thinner on that brush so we get just barely enough of that hair. And we'll do a little bit at a time instead of the whole hair I tried to do all at once a minute ago. Excellent. All right, that looks good. All right, dodging and burning. It's an old term based on what we used to have to do in the darkroom, where we actually literally dodged and burned the negative or the exposure onto the paper from the negative. Burning meant you added more light to it. Dodging meant you took less, or you exposed that portion of it with less light. We'll do something similar here with an extra layer. This time I'm creating a new layer, a new blank layer. So this button that I've got up here is just create new raster layer. It's completely transparent. There's nothing in it right now. And I'm going to take, I've already got them set up. I've got a white brush and a black brush. And what we're going to do is go in where we want to have highlights. We're going to go in, we're going to paint. Oh, I'm still in soft light mode from earlier. So let me go back to normal. I go to a normal opacity, or a 100 opacity and normal blend mode. And I'm just going to paint in some white where I want to have some enhancements done. And then we're going to use a black brush. Actually, I did that backwards. Let me go back and do this again. I want black right here along the eyebrow. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It can be sloppy because of the next step we're going to do. I'm going to do just a little bit of black right here, a little bit of white here. At the beginning, it looks really bad, and it's supposed to. We're going to highlight some black right here, highlight white on the nose, highlight white down the edge of the nose. And right here where the Cupid's bow is, we're going to add in a little bit of black down the middle and whites along the edges. And I'm going to go ahead and give her a dimple. This is really rough right now. We're doing it very quickly. Again, we're going to take the Gaussian blur tool. We're not going to do 100% this time though, because as you can tell, it just wiped it out on the preview. We're going to do this at about 10% or about a 10 radius. So we can still see the whites, but it's got soft edges on it. All right, still looks really bad, right? So the trick here is to change this blending mode for this layer now to soft light, and then start changing the opacity down. And it's going to be a fairly low opacity. It's going to come down into the 30 range. And the idea is to have just a subtle difference. It adds just a little bit of dimension up here, brings out the highlights above her eyes, darkens this circle a little bit while bringing out the tip of her nose, and brings out a little bit of a dimple and a little bit of more of the Cupid's bow under her nose. Subtle differences, small changes is what you want to have. Again, we have a little bit of time, so we're going to go here. We're going to go in and we'll go in and check for any blemishes on her face real fast. There's a few right around her nose. We're going to go in and do that. We'll go ahead and merge in what we did a minute ago. And we'll clean up a couple of these blemishes, clean up a couple of stray hairs. There's one right under her lip. Oh no, that looks like a birthmark. We're not going to take out a birthmark. We'll leave the birthmark. And as we did before on the other one, this outfit that she has on lost some of her shape around the waist. So we're going to use the warp brush to add just a little bit of shape back in that I know she has there. Again, very subtle differences. We're not going to make huge differences with the warp brush. We're just going to give her a little bit of curve and a little bit of hit back again from the clothing that she's got on and the way the clothing's fitting. Let me zoom back in on her eyes and we'll do the enhancement on the eyes again so you can see that one more time. Oh, I missed a stray hair right there next to her eye. Let's take that out before we do anything else. Gonna take a really small width this time on the scratch remover because we're in a real delicate area. All right, again, we're going to duplicate the layer, duplicate it again, select the middle layer, adjust, sharpness, high pass sharpen, using the default settings we had. Erase it off the top layer. And then we'll take a white brush. Oops, I'm on the wrong blending mode. Hang on. 20%. Soft light. Blending mode on the brush, on the paintbrush. On the middle layer. Make sure we're on the middle layer. Paint that in, paint that in. Looks good. Merge that all together. And then lastly, let's do a background replacement on her as well. Let's just take this blue background I had earlier. I picked out for her. Just gonna make an abstract blue background for her. Come on, there we go. We're going to copy that background to the clipboard. Going to paste this new layer in between those two layers, so it's now in the middle. I haven't done my cutout yet, so I'll have to go do that. We're going to size it so that it fills that background now before we go and do the cutout. Select this top layer. We'll go to Object Extractor again on the image menu. Now there are plugins that do extractions that are a little cleaner, but for what we're doing again here today, this one is just fine. And whatever background extractor you want to use or foreground extractor you want to use is just fine. Just have to learn all the nuances of any given one you're using. Different ones have different pluses and minuses for how they operate. This one has the benefit of being built into PaintShop Pro, which is why we're using it today. And the technology for these object extracting methods gets better all the time as well. Each new method, each new version of PaintShop Pro, including this one, improves with every new iteration. The computers get more powerful, and the software gets more powerful along with it. Again, it's a sloppy background, sloppy extraction. I just want to make sure that I get most of this background erased. Use this fill brush to fill in what I'm keeping. Change my accuracy level a little higher. It defaults to defaults to this one right here. That's it. That I guess one half mark. Then the 3/4 mark is what I usually set it at. Looks pretty good. We want to change the blending mode of that middle layer into something like multiply or overlay in this particular case because I have a white background. The overlay doesn't look good. This shows you a really good example of what overlay is doing though. Because of the white background, the overlay is not showing the blue of this background. Because of the white background, it's not showing the blue of this layer, but where her shadow was against the wall, it is showing through very well. Overlay mode is not appropriate for this particular image. But hard light looks actually pretty good, so we're going to keep hard light. And I could go in here as well now and clean up some of these extra edges, some of the edges that got mixed up when I did the extraction a minute ago. But we don't really have time for doing all of that. And really, that's a whole nother layer, the whole layer webinar. I did a webinar on layers, I guess about this time last year. And you can go back and find it on the Corel website. And that'll explain a little bit more about how you can clean up some of those extra edges. But that was just a fast, dirty method to do in this particular case. So I think we have time for a few questions, if there are any. Carly, are you still there?
Yeah, still here. We do have a couple really quick questions, Brad.
Okay.
First one, a couple people are wondering if you're using a mouse or a pen and tablet.
Actually, I use a trackball that is made by Logitech, and it's just a personal preference. I'm dysgraphic, and I've never really felt comfortable with a pen in my hand. I'm not happy with a pen interface most of the time. Now that said, I recently got a touchscreen laptop, and I have a bamboo pen, and I will sometimes use it for some of my retouching, just drawing directly on the screen, and I find that to be more natural than a tablet. But again, it's a personal preference. There's nothing wrong with doing it any given way. I find I have a lot more accuracy with a trackball than I would with a mouse. I haven't used a mouse in years, but I've never been able to adapt to a tablet, so I don't use one personally.
Perfect. Okay, another question I've seen a couple times now is how are you increasing and decreasing your brush size so quickly? Is there a keyboard shortcut you're using?
This is a trick. This is a keyboard shortcut. I meant to talk about that. Let's zoom in a little bit here so you can see on a consistent area screen so you can see what it is. All right, it works for almost all the different brushes, so we'll just use it for a paintbrush. Now you see how big my paintbrush is right here. Now the way to increase and decrease this quickly is to hold the Alt key down and then left click on your mouse or in my case the trackball, and drag down to increase the size or drag up to decrease the size. It's a really cool, quick method. I'm not certain how well it works with a tablet. I think it does the same thing on a tablet. I think if you hold down the Alt key and draw a line up or draw a line down with your pen, it will do the same thing. It will increase and decrease the size of your brush. And that works for any brush. It works for the push brush. Oops, that's not the push brush. It works for the push brush, where I can increase and decrease, and it works for clone brush. Let's bring clone in. The clone the same way, increase and decrease. You hold the Alt key down and scroll up and down with your mouse or your trackball or with the pen on your tablet to increase and decrease the size quickly.
Perfect. One more question here. How did you create a box and zoom into just that boxed area? So, I believe that was just the zoom.
I believe that's just the zoom tool. And what you do when you select the zoom tool, most people are, when you first do it, you'll just be clicking on it. But if you click and drag, it creates a box that zooms in where that box is.
Exactly, yep.
And then left click again, we'll zoom back out.
Perfect, thank you for that. And actually one more here. If you could just show again where you find the blemish tool. There's one question I have here to locate the blemish tool.
Okay, the blemish tool is this one that looks here like a little bit of a makeup palette. And if you hover over it, it'll say makeup tool. If you click on it, there's 4 more things that show up here. And you have the blemish fixer, which is what we were using today. The toothbrush, which will whiten teeth. The eyedropper, which is supposed to help remove redness in the eyes. Suntan, I don't know that I've ever used, honestly. And Thinify. Thinify is fun. Thinify will take, wherever you click, that's what it takes as the middle, and it brings everything in towards that middle to make things a little thinner. I just clicked, oops, sorry, I'm just on the background. Let me flatten this image and I'll show you again. Flatten this image. See, if I click right here in the middle, it brings everything in just a little bit to thin things down, and you can adjust the strength of it. You can click multiple times, and it keeps making them thinner and thinner and thinner until they disappear completely. Thinify is really good in, again, just like the warp brush, it's really good in small quantities.
Perfect, and I'm just getting one message now asking if you can show again where the push tool is, please.
Where the push tool is. Push tool is on this menu here. It's mixed in with the dodge and the burn tools, which I don't use. I use the other method I showed you a minute ago. Smudge, push is right underneath it, and soften and the color replacer. They're all kind of on the same part of the toolbar. Push is the only one I ever use on this toolbar myself.